Hello there guys, and welcome to the channel. So finally we do have Kraven's abilities, and just as the initial information suggested, root mechanic is back and Kraven will have access to it. So that's gonna make it fairly interesting, and you know, not worried about bugs at all here. But okay, let's move on. So when it comes to the prestige, it's fine. It's not bad. It's not amazing. He's not a prestige champion. He is, however, a skill champion and apparently also quite demanding champion to play. So think you're, trickier to use champions like Professor X and perhaps Ghost or Tigra and the like. Now his basic abilities center around rooting opponents, reducing their combat power rate, inflicting bleeds on them, and you can also disorient them with a heavy attack, which is kind of neat. I always like when they put an ability and a debuff or something on a heavy attack. It's very nice to kind of just not feel like that attack is wasted. So either way, root is back, and what root does is basically freezes opponents in a place. Think of root as a glue, in a sense. Right, so he also has access to true accuracy, which might be one of the better things about the character, because that is incredibly invaluable buff and ability to have, and also thanks to a synergy, his true accuracy, if that synergy is in play, can bypass miss. So he can bypass evade, auto block, and miss, and that alone, can potentially make him quite useful. His weaknesses: opponents with specials that cover long distance. Again, think Tigra, think Venom, and a few others. And bleed immune champions, but he can kind of bypass that with a synergy as well. Right, so let's just jump into it. Jungle Fighter. Heavy attacks. First hit inflicts non-stacking disorient debuff, decreasing block proficiency and defensive ability accuracy by 40% for 16 seconds. So it's a fairly solid duration on disorient, but 40% is not really that much. I think the fact that it is disorient is kind of like more important in itself, because there are nodes that kind of require or revolve around it. Also, critical hits inflict a bleed debuff. That is a fairly weak bleed, though. It's only 557 over 8 seconds, so it's not going to be the strongest bleed. When debuffed, now this is going to be a pain in the bum ability, as in like a huge pain when you're going to be fighting against the guy, because you're effectively only going to get a couple of parries, or I can only imagine if you fight against him, like, let's say, in Alliance War where masteries are a thing, you can probably stun him maybe once or twice. Because every time he receives a non-damaging debuff, you reduce the duration of future non-damaging debuffs by 10% for the rest of the fight. So that will definitely make him very tricky to parry stun. And that is also, if he's awakened, something that you will not want to do. But either way, we're going to get there. So yeah, he can reduce non-damaging debuff duration by 80%. It's kind of like Taskmaster, just not as good as Taskmaster, I'd say. Okay, moving on. Developer's Note. As an attacker, this ability is useful against champions that passively inflict debuffs, but this ability is more useful as defender. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Either way, Trap. Special one. If the opponent moves into trap, it springs and deals a burst of 1700 direct damage, and it only scales with base attacks. That's very important to know, because otherwise he would be even scarier as a defender. You can root them for 5 seconds. If the opponent moves into the trap with a special attack, the trap is removed and nothing happens. So if Kraven ever uses level 1 against you in a fight, your plan and what you want to do is you either want to never cross that line on the map, or you want to cross it with a special attack. If the opponent is pushed into a trap by a heavy or special 2, Kraven has a 100% chance to place a new trap when the root expires. Fair play. So heavies and special 2s, quite dangerous there, and that's probably going to be also how you want to play offensively. Rooted champions cannot move but can still attack, dodge, and block. Activating a special attack removes root and prevents it from applying. So even if you get yourself rooted, then what you need to do is wait for Kraven to dash in, I suppose, and use a special attack. But when he dashes in at you, he's going to be unstoppable. So that's going to be a fairly interesting time. While the opponent is rooted, Kraven's dash attacks become unstoppable. His damage over time debuffs are paused, and he gains 1400 critical rating. While the opponent's rooted, their combat power rate is reduced by 37.5%. So overall, being rooted, on the paper at the very least, doesn't seem like the end of the world. You have lowered combat power rate, and he's going to be hitting harder. But after 5 seconds, you're kind of free anyways. So we'll see how hard it is going to be going up against this guy on defense. Suppression crossfight. Traps also inflict crossfight suppression passive on the opponent, reducing combat power rate by 6.25% for this and the next 5 fights, max 2 stacks. Traps cannot suppress opponents with natural class advantage if the following fight suppression potency is increased by 100%. So you can effectively reduce combat power rate by 50% in the fight that you're in. Now, the fact that it is a crossfight ability is actually quite annoying. It's kind of like Airwalker, where you will never ever really use it offensively, because it only comes into play if you die with Kraven, basically, and then you need to finish off the opponent. So, yeah, it's again one of those things where, you know, against Airwalker, or when you get, I don't know, beat Mr. Fantastic and you have the crossfight on where your special attacks don't deal damage, really going to be just kind of like another annoying thing. So I don't put much value in this, I suppose. Alright, special attacks. Root debuff and precision debuffs are paused. Fair play. Special 1. Kraven sets a trap at the opponent's location. The trap arms after 5 seconds and lasts until triggered. New traps replace existing ones. As a defender, traps are placed at his location and arm immediately. Traps are not affected by ability accuracy reduction. Cool. If the opponent is already rooted by trap, critical damage rating is increased by 182. That's fairly pointless, I think. For the duration of this attack. Instead, bleed effects are paused. Gain a non-stacking true accuracy buff that lasts for 20 seconds. Triggering a trap refreshes this effect. So you can likely keep this true accuracy for the entire fight, but the entire point of level 1 is, yes, the true accuracy, which is a very big part of his kit, and then it is to actually place the initial trap. And then if you play right, you can probably just use level 2s and whatever not, and never use level 1 again. But let's move on to that. Special 2, Dirty Tricks. On activation, gain a precision buff, increasing critical rating by 1000. That's actually quite a lot, and you can stack up to 5, so you can get 5 very potent precisions. And whenever you're triggering a trap, you refresh those precisions. So you want to be triggering those traps quite frequently. The first hit is unblockable and inflicts a poison debuff, dealing 2300 damage over 3 seconds. So that's going to be fairly decent poison. If the opponent is rooted, refresh all bleed effects. Cool. Okay, and special 3, gain a cruelty buff. Cool. If the opponent is rooted, the gain of power during the special attack and potency of the cruelty buff is increased by 100%. Okay. And the opponent is not rooted, but the trap is placed, even if not armed, the trap springs in regardless of the opponent's position. So it kind of mandatory triggers the trap. Okay, fine. Sig ability, it is going to be required for damage, definitely. And it's also going to be required for defense, I think. Because while the opponent is rooted, dash attacks grant a trample passive, making the attack unblockable except... Oh no, never mind, unblockable except against well-timed blocks. But here's the trick. He's going to have super reduced parry duration, so it's going to be very hard to parry him, and you're not going to be able to kind of like counter it anyway. So it sounds very annoying where if you don't parry, he's going to be unstoppable. If you do parry, he's going to pretty much shrug off that stun instantly, and it's just going to be a quite messy experience, I would say. We'll see how it works out. While the opponent is rooted, all bleeds are critical bleeds, multiplying their potency by 200%. Now that is quite interesting, and that is also perhaps going to make that heavy bleed quite significantly, well, better. Right. And then he has a bunch of interesting synergies, mainly significantly improving himself, but he also can boost up Tiger's damage decently well by giving her 1500 critical damage. But let's get there. So, Obsession 3-star plus. Kraven once per fight when receiving damage that will result in a knockout, gain an immortality buff preventing death for 8 seconds. That synergy is with Spider-Man Classic, Spider-Man Symbiote. Armor break debuffs are paused during specials and their durations increased by 7 seconds. So, you know, Spidey's, both of these suck though, so it's not going to, you know, matter much. Now, let's see, this synergy with Tigra. On a critical hit, inflict a fragility debuff for 5 seconds. When attacking a fragile opponent, increase critical damage rating by 200 and decrease their block proficiency by 15%. So this is, you know, neat. Access to more debuffs, kind of like it. And Tigra, while the opponent's neutralized, you gain a lot of critical rating. I really kind of like this one for Tigra and for Kraven as well. Now, misunderstanding, this is also for 5 stars plus. Kraven's true accuracy ignores the effects of miss, so that is very important. And luckily, it's also with a good champion, which is Venompool. Fighting bleed immune champions, when inflicting bleeds, inflict matching degeneration instead. So, you know, can be quite useful. Agent Venom, again, this part doesn't matter, but basically whenever you fail in a way, you inflict bleed debuff on them or something. But, you know, who cares? Agent Venom. Right, Sasquatch Beast Dragonman. Stunning a stun immune champion will instead inflict non-stacking concussion debuff, reducing ability accuracy by 60%. That's kind of cool. Kind of like that. So, you know, could be useful, could be quite quirky. And now we have Fun Adventures. Kraven, bleed immune champions are inflicted by poison debuff instead. Which, you know, fair enough. And poison pauses and refreshes just as bleed. However, you do not get the critical poison from his SIG ability, so that would lower his damage, which is something to be very, very well aware of. Similarly, like with Hawkeye, because he has the abilities to inflict poison instead of bleed, but then, you know, you don't get the critical bleed kind of thing. When the opponent is afflicted injury debuff, Squirrel Girl has 50% chance to gain a precision buff and a 50% chance to gain a cruelty buff. So, you know, could be some more damage for Squirrel Girl, but, you know, I doubt it's going to be enough to make her amazing. However, since there's 6, Dr. Octopus, Electro, Green Goblin, Rhino, Vulture, when fighting heroes, combat rate is increased by 25%. That's actually quite good. I suppose for Vulture, because, let's face it, Electro, Green Goblin, and Rhino. All in all, that's about it. I kind of like him. I kind of like what I read. It's definitely gonna, you know, take a lot of playtesting, getting used to him. But through accuracy, that also bypass miss. There aren't many champions in a game that bypass simultaneously evade, miss, and auto block. So I do like that. Also, ability to inflict, you know, debuffs with his heavy attacks, disorient, and then the bleed. And he also has access to poison. So it's very kind of rare to have a skill champion that has access to poison, I suppose. All in all, I think he could be cool. He looks quite cool. But ultimately, it obviously still comes down to how he's to play, how good or bad his numbers look, and all that other stuff. He immediately does seem like quite an annoying defender. Now, again, I might be wrong, but reading things on paper, you know, up to 80% reduced debuff duration, that's very painful for a ton of champions. So that immediately means like majority of the science champions are going to be bad against him. Majority of the cosmic champions would be very bad against him. Like, if you try to use, I don't know, CGR against him, yes, you can try and nuke him down, but if he's chunky enough, then, you know, all the armor breaks last, you know, 20%. It's kind of like using Cosmic Ghost Rider against Rogue, for instance, and things like that. And then you have, obviously, his own abilities to keep in mind. So, we'll see. We'll see. But he's definitely worth keeping an eye out for. He's definitely not a write-off on the get-go. And we have Root Mechanic, which I'm not worried at all. You know, nothing bad ever happens in this game when introducing new mechanic. Kabam is notoriously frugal, weeding out bugs, playtesting, and all that other good stuff. Therefore, I have the utmost confidence that absolutely no unintended interactions will have slipped through the carefully casted net by the, well, the most dominant force within Kabam, which is their playtest team, design team. I don't even know. Either way, let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about